Spencer.
Just think of goodwill once in a while. It might be to what end. Oh no,
We got to get going. Get everybody's attention. We're just a few minutes late. Haven't asked anybody with everything else, but Senator Albers, could you open us up? Invocation.
Please bow your heads. Lord, thank you for today. Thank you for this opportunity to serve the people. Lord, we just ask you in these final days of the legislative session, you give each one of us grace and humility, some wisdom and discernment, so we can finish strong and ultimately serve you. It's in your most holy name we make our prayer. Amen.
Amen. All right, we will go ahead with House Bill 101, Representative Crowe, if you want to come up on that one. Let's go through that a little bit. And there's also an amendment in your folder. So the first part of the bill is the rural hospital tax credit, and we clarified that it begins I think January 21st, 2025. I'll check with Ledge Council. We may need some help. Some of this has happened faster, and make sure we've got our sunsets and our start dates right on all this stuff. Yeah, it stands repealed on December 31st, 2029, but we need to make sure it also starts January 1st, 2025. Can you check on that for the... Okay. So I think what you're, if I'm hearing Ledge Council, lines 283 and 284, the very last page, you're saying that applies to the entire bill, that it begins January 1st, 2025? Okay. So we're covered on that. Now, this is the standard hospital tax credit language we've had with the other stuff added in. On section 1.4 is what I would call the habitat part of this that was added in at the request of some people that wanted to look at that. How about that on beginning and ending? The habitat starts on line 150, and it goes through 252. But I don't see a beginning and ending. I guess the whole section would begin, but I don't see a sunset on this. We need to add one, don't we, on that, if we consider that part of it. Okay, section 3, section 2122. I believe this is the language you've done for Max Burns for his thing that hadn't passed out. Now we're hearing today the House is going to pass out tomorrow. I may just leave it in there just since it's there anyway. And then the last thing I've got to add to this is an amendment you'll see in there, and you can help me on what we do on this. But basically, this is back when we had the data centers. The fiscal note assumed that the tenants were going to be part of it. There was a lot of concern that wasn't clarified in the bill. And so what this amendment would do would clarify it for those tenants for that 2-year period, July 2024 to June 2026. I know DOR didn't think that it was clear language on that, and we heard concerns about that. We also know we wanted to leave that bill intact, and that's why the method was not to change the bill so that it didn't go back over to the House, but to try to do it this way. And I would further add, looking at this, that probably on line 18, instead of has been issued, we would say applied for, because that's sort of what we heard from DOR. They've got to have it applied for, not necessarily completed. Does that seem okay? Are you looking at that with me? Is that okay? So those are the 4 sections in this early Christmas tree bill, I guess. Senator Albers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think the clarification of the amendment is nice. I love Habitat for Humanity. I've actually helped part of the build teams. I guess my question, though, on this is they're already a 501c3 charity. People can get a tax-deductible donation. If we're picking one charity, not a group, my question is I'm sure Goodwill will be here next year. And then everybody after that will want the exact same one that's a charity, which is going from a traditional write-off to a 501c3 to having a full credit. And I think that we have to be careful, because if we keep doing this, this is all to what end? Again, everybody loves Habitat for Humanity, magnificent organization, but we're definitely picking one out of many if we do that. I just think something we better be very cognizant of.
And if you think we're all directing it to you, I know this isn't all your bill. Let's make that clear.
And I don't even have a copy of the one y'all are looking
Okay, well,
at. Get one of those, that'd be
We'll make
fantastic. I mean, it sounds lovely though. I mean, it sounds great.
let's, yeah, he said that's how he felt about the budget, you know. So the other thing I noticed in there, and I know you're not really responsible for the Habitat part, but the fees at 10% for administrative costs seem kind of high to me. But anyway, we've got, I believe Senator Hickman was next.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. Would you just kind of help me understand what is in this amendment versus what y'all passed out earlier today? What's it? I thought the one we passed out earlier today had something about the private school tax credit also.
There's nothing in here
It's
on
not- I know there's nothing. in this one.
nothing in here on the private school at all.
Is there anything else that was? Is there anything else not in here that was in that previous bill this morning? That's what I'm trying to. Seemed like just.
I'm not sure, what bill are you referring to?
Well, I thought the one that y'all sent out had. I thought the bill on the agenda had the private school tax credit in here also.
There's been about 10 or 15 probably subs on this, so I'm not sure. It may have, but there's
This one
nothing,
doesn't anymore, Billy.
nothing in there
Not
on that.
anymore.
Well, I know not anymore, but when did all that? I'm just trying to get in my mind how fast this stuff is changing and how well we can keep up with it. That's my
I
problem.
feel the same way, and spent all
You feel my-
weekend
Bill Clinton said you
working
feel
on
my
it.
pain, huh?
So I'm trying to explain what we have here. We've got the rural hospital tax credit with a sunset 2029. We've got the Habitat, which I think there's some concerns on the language and expenses and stuff like that. We've got the amendment to clarify the data center bill last week because we want to leave that intact. And then, of course, we've got Max Burns in here, which may or may not be necessary, but he would probably prefer that we left it in here.
I think, Mr. Chairman, if I'm reading this right, to section 1.3, does that leave the tax credits for public schools in here? Is that intentional?
Correct, and the reason for that is that was added onto a bill over in the House, but it didn't have a start date of January of 2025, and I should have explained that.
Okay, thank you.
We're trying to, and this only works if the governor signs this second, but we're trying to help DOR out and not have them have a change in the middle of the year. We want it to be starting next year. So that's the only reason this section's in there.
Okay. Yeah, I knew it was in the original, and it looked kind of the same, but a little different.
I was gonna take
so-
it out when you guys passed it out, but then I saw the date wasn't really correct. And so, that's why we're having it in here as well.
Okay, thank you.
It's moving fast on both sides, I know, and I think that date probably should have been in there. Okay, I think, is it Senator Beach that's next?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative, now that you have a copy, can you look at page 5, lines 99 through 108, and explain to me that if a potential donor wants to make a contribution, in what situation would the commissioner deny that? Why would the commissioner get involved if they want to make a donation to the rural hospital organization?
I don't know that I can answer that. I think we'd have to have somebody from the commissioner's office to, what's that?
What's that?
And that's already in the law, right? We're not changing that, is that?
To 80 million? Okay.
All right, Senator Dolezal, I think you were next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't know if this is a question for you or the author of the bill, specifically as it relates to what Chairman Albers was talking about around these the habitat tax credit. I noticed a $20 million statewide cap on line 162, and then I noticed a $2 million cap per organization on line 163. Is that done with an eye towards, I guess, are there specific habitat chapters throughout the state, and the policy goal here is to spread these donations around the state? I'm just kind of curious how this functionally would work.
I wouldn't be the one to answer that, and I'm not sure.
Yeah, I have a little bit of knowledge about that, Senator, and that was the idea. There are several different habitat chapters. So down in my area is Southern Crescent Habitat. There's several throughout the state. So it gives one over aggregate cap total for the state, but then it breaks that up into try to get it distributed throughout all of the different ones.
So this is a dollar for dollar credit minus some sort of fee can you explain the fee portion that they were talking about?
If you don't mind, I got the original offer, the original bill here. He can come up and help. Spencer, you want to jump in on that?
Come on up. So you've got a 10% fee, so I
friend.
guess they're limited to 2 million per chapter, but then they can take 200,000 off for administrative expenses.
Yes, sir. So basically, your question, Senator Dolezal, is there's some larger affiliates that we didn't want to absorb all the funding. We wanted it to be spread out, and we have a number of rural affiliates that we're trying to lift up with this type of tax credit. The fee was based on, I felt like I wrote it at a 90-10, so 90% sticks, bricks, and dirt, 10% admin. If we want to lower that, that's fine. I've seen we had a tax credit bill that was at a 20% admin that we passed out of the House recently, and so I figured 10 was better. If it's the will of the committee, lower the heck out of it. I don't really care. We can make it 0% admin if you want. I just think that this is going to be an opportunity to offer housing during a big housing crisis to hardworking families, and people we build homes for have good credit. They have jobs. They're pre-qualified. We have like a 1% foreclosure rate across the nation, and we just feel like it's a good policy.
All right, Senator Tillery's next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have two questions about two very different parts of the bill. Section 1.1 on line 27. There's a substantial definition change. Used to, rural hospital was defined as a hospital that provides inpatient hospital services at a facility, and now we've got it changed to has its primary campus located in that rural county. Do you think that makes the definition more expansive? Like, is it to include more hospitals or fewer hospitals?
Yeah, fewer.
Just to include fewer?
Yeah, I mean, that's the way I originally read it.
I just wondered what the policy position was behind that and kind of where it came from.
This is our phone a friend portion still. I saw Anna over here, and Anna Adams has a lot of information related to that. If she may can answer that as well.
Okay.
Come on, Anna.
Sure, I'll let Anna step up for a second on
Thank
that
you, Mr.
part.
Chairman. Sorry, I keep a lot of
Representative
different
Fry
parts of
left
this
way
with
too
different
quick.
pieces.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was trying not to. I know the answer. This was to
Now,
include.
maybe everybody doesn't know who you are, maybe they do, but tell us who you are.
Thank you. I'm Anna Adams with the Georgia Hospital Association. So we represent 145 hospitals in the state, including the recipients of the Rural Hospital Tax Credit. This definition change is to include 2 facilities in Georgia that have recently converted to become rural emergency hospitals. This is a new federal designation that allows these rural hospitals to kind of convert down to essentially be what we're calling a rural freestanding emergency department. And under this definition, they no longer have inpatient beds, but they do still offer emergency services and can do some observation beds in order to meet the needs of the community. So right now we have 2. We have a couple of additional hospitals that are considering making that conversion as well.
And he was asking about the primary campus part there too.
Yes, and then has its primary campus. is just to make sure that it is the standalone rural emergency hospital and it's not some facility of an existing hospital that is kind of spinning off to act like a freestanding ED, if that makes sense.
So you think it's going to be a more expansive definition or a more limiting definition?
It would include 2 additional hospitals that were previously, before their conversion, eligible for the tax credit. But then once they converted, because they had to get
So let
rid
me-
of.
Can I give you an example?
Mhm.
This is not my area. So let's say Dahlonega,
Okay.
where Northeast Georgia has recently bought that hospital there.
Hmm.
There,
Yes.
clearly the Dahlonega one would be rural by definition.
Yes.
But since Northeast Georgia has its primary campus in Hall County, would the Dahlonega Hospital be unable to accept rural hospital funds?
No, they would still be eligible to because that is its own primary campus. They have their own provider identification number at that location.
That was my question.
Yeah.
And
I have-
that makes more sense now, because we have Sylvan Grove in Jackson, and it's a Wellstar hospital. And so a lot of Wellstars don't qualify, but Sylvan Grove does qualify for it still. And this wouldn't change that, because that is designated, that is owned by the Butts County Hospital Authority. It's its own campus, but it is managed by Wellstar.
Okay. And then I have a different question about a completely different section of your bill.
Thank
Okay,
you.
great, thank you.
On lines 153 through 155, exempted mortgage loan originator.
Yes.
I flipped through the new language to try to find that. I'm sure it's in here somewhere. Ah, here it is on line 214. But I was trying to figure out what we, help me understand what, is this a new credit that just applies only to mortgage loan originators? How's that come in here?
That's essentially how you're defining Habitat for Humanity. That's what they are. That is we're not saying Habitat for Humanity, but this is describing Habitat for Humanity. They originate the mortgage. It's like a forgiven mortgage, essentially. No. Okay, go ahead. This is fun. Maybe I should go sit down and leave them two up here. That'd be better.
Thank you, Senator, for the question. That is actually the way that when the federal government passed the laws that we had to have mortgage license originators, rather than all Habitat affiliates becoming licensed in the mortgage industry, we were able to write a carve-out defining a mortgage loan originator as someone whose team isn't reimbursed for or has no profit involved into the transaction, meaning that our mortgage loan originators don't profit from closing these mortgages, and it offers a 0% interest mortgage, and it's payable by whatever years, depending on the affiliate. But it was a definition that's in the banks and banking code for the mortgage loan origination carve-out that has held up for about a decade, or whenever we did it. Don't quote me on that. It could have been 8 years, but has held up with no outside folks coming in saying, hey, I want to do this, because nobody gives 0 interest mortgages. And so that's how it's tightened up to make it clearly defined on who would be eligible.
All right. When the appropriations chair mentioned Dahlonega, the majority leader lit up his thing over there. Well, now I can't make it get on. Hit it one more time. I'm not making it come on for some reason. Yeah, go to number 2.
All right, is this one on? I think I wanted to ask Anna the question. Inquiring minds want to know who the 2 hospitals are, because everybody in the room's wondering, so why don't we just put it out there on the table?
The first is Irwin County Hospital. It was actually the first in the nation to become a rural emergency hospital. The second is Fannin, which is in the Kinner District.
All right, thank you.
All right, Senator Albers.
Fannin, yes.
I actually need Spencer back now, sorry. Spencer, you said you had an original bill, I believe, that had this in it. Was it a standalone bill?
Yes, sir.
Even though I can see there's numbers in here, do you have a fiscal note for that?
$20 million maybe.
But do you have an actual
less.
fiscal note from Department of Audits?
No, sir, because when there's a cap on the amount of tax dollars that could be spent, we have not been required to attach a fiscal note to it in the House because it can't go over 20 million. It could be less, but it won't go over 20.
And we typically get a fiscal note for anything that impacts the state budget. In this case, whether it be $20 million, there could be cost to administration of that tax credit, there could be other costs associated with that. Something we should probably look to do. Thank you.
All right, is that Senator Eccles? Somebody's lit up over there, or Senator Hodges?
It was me, but I just got my answer.
Okay. All right, I'm not seeing any more questions. We've got 4 bills today, and I know a lot of this has been talked about a lot. I'm trying to think if there's somebody that really should speak to this that hasn't, depending on if there's a issue with that part of the bill. So I guess it's a la carte here for the committee. We've got 4 sections here. Okay, so we've got a motion and a second to pass now. We need to add the amendment, the clarifying language, which was in there, with the exception of on lines 18. I want to change has been issued to has been applied for.
And strike A as well. That has applied for as it should.
That has applied for, yes. Now, I need Ledge Council to help me out. We've also got a sunset, but
We don't actually need the sunset because it's in the text.
okay.
We should be good on that.
On the habitat part, you've got, she's saying that the sunset's in there. So she's drawn this up, the amendment that said it would be HB 101 to LC 500890S by inserting on line 16 after properties, the upper language, and then by inserting between lines 280 and 81 in section 22, the lower language, again with that has been applied for instead of issued. Was that what your amendment was, Senator Hickman? Yes, sir. I thought that was what you were thinking. Okay, and we got a second to the amendment. Okay, any, let's see, Senator Tillery.
I had an amendment, Mr. Chairman.
Okay,
My amendment would be to pull section 1.4.
okay, we've got a motion to amend it by removing section 1.4, and there's a second to that. So, are we at 2 amendments right now because we didn't need the sunset? Okay, so that would be amendment 2. Which order do I need to go on them? Does it matter? First one, okay, so the first one by Senator Hickman, there's a motion and a second. All in favor of that amendment, raise your hand.
Guys, this is data center amendment. Data center
Okay.
amendment, you call it.
The data center amendment, okay. Yeah, this would, the essence of it, and it's in your folder there, you can read it on that one page, but the essence of it is if you have contracted for services with a high technology data center that has applied for a certificate of exemption. So that's the one we just did, and let's raise your hands one more time on it. The data center clarifying amendment. Okay, that looks like it's all but maybe one. Those opposed? One opposed. Okay, now we're to the second amendment, which would strike section 1.4. Any discussion on this? All right.
Oh, I have discussion on the second amendment too.
Yeah, go ahead.
I haven't heard a compelling argument for striking this. I think there's a compelling argument for addressing this. In my district, we have benefited for years from the work of Habitat for Humanity. the Carters are noteworthy for their national and international participation in this effort, which puts people in homes and gives them a new lease on life to raise their families with security. And the model is that they involve the families have to be rigorously chosen and trained, a prolonged process, and they participate in the build along with churches and community and civic organizations. The result being housing people in secure, safe housing that they have a long-term investment in, and it helps. It's been a major driver in communities in my district of really rebuilding blighted communities, putting in stable housing and families that are going to be there, send their children to school there, and be a part of the community.
All right.
It's a stabilizer as well, for the community as well as the individual family.
Okay, Senator Estevez?
I think Senator Orrock said a lot of what I was going to say. The only thing I would add to that is, to the extent that we can be promoting more supply of affordable housing for Georgians, we should be doing that through at the state level as well as local levels.
All right, Senator Albers, you're next.
I don't think anybody here is going to deny the value of Habitat for Humanity. It's a great organization. I think the question that comes up is there's not a fiscal note, and there should have been. And if we start picking one single charity to start doing this from, it's all to what end? This will come up to the next one. There's a lot of good causes out there that we all like that are 501c3s, and we can start picking them off one at a time. And I think we have to be careful to what end we do some of this stuff on. It's important, but remember, a 501c3 already, when you make a donation to them, you already get to write a good portion off on your taxes. That exists today, and it will exist 10 years from now. So we're adding more when I don't think it's necessary.
Did you have a comment, Senator Tillery? Was that? Okay, I believe that's Senator Anavitarte, our Congress chair.
Hey, Mr. Chairman. So, question I have is, if we strike this section, do we know what the measured outcome is if we do strike this? I mean, not in terms of, I think kind of where Senator Albers is going, but do we know what the true impact is on the ground to the people it impacts?
It doesn't exist today, so it would be different on that. Okay, I think everybody's had a turn on this. So have you got something new to add? You need to be quick.
I want to respond to the contention by Senator Albers, Vice Chair. And this, we have a top-level house on fire crisis with lack of adequate housing in this state. So it's not like we just picked a charity and said, let's do something nice and feel good. We're trying to address a high-stakes need across our state, and I would say it's in each one of our districts, of people seeking affordable housing. And that would be the argument for why we take this measure at this time.
All right. I don't see any other discussion on this. All in favor of this amendment, raise your hand. All right, opposed? All right, that amendment carries too. So we're back to the underlying bill. I was going to say something on the fees, but that's not necessary at this time because that part's been stricken. All in favor of this bill as amended, raise your hand. One, two. The underlying bill, yeah. Okay. And opposed. We've got 2 opposed to the bill. Motion carries. And do you have a Senate sponsor?
No, sir, not currently. This was last year's bill, so.
I know. Well, you can get with us.
Okay.
On it.
Oh, well, thank you.
Okay. Representative Camp, you want to come up now?
Are we going to do 1182 still today?
Yeah.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine. I just didn't know
Okay.
if I should leave yet or not.
Yeah. That's right. You do have both of them.
Thank you.
All
sir.
right.
Oh, okay.
So go ahead, tell us your LC number.
Sure, it's LC 432768, S as in Sam, and it's House Bill 283.
Okay, we may have an updated one. Is 50 the most recent one? We'll check on that. There may be, and it might have just been a date change or something. I'm not sure.
That was something we did discuss, was, I believe on the last page, there's an issue with a date. But if there's a copy available, I would
We'll
love to
get it
have
to
it.
you.
Thank you.
50. Mhm.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so tell us what you're doing, but I will also say that this first section on the one-time tax credit, I'm not been in favor of, and I requested that we at least take that part out.
Yes,
Is
sir,
that
and
agreeable?
I agree with that synopsis. The crux of what the initial part of my bill, this was an omnibus bill from the House, came over last year. My bill actually begins Part 2, Section 2.1, and it actually repeals a manufacturer's tax credit that did exist. And moving forward in Section 2.2, it actually talks about using 60% of the manufacturer's invoice amount. The reason being, stick-built homes in the state are taxed on materials only. They're not taxed on labor. If we go out and build a house, the tax is simply going to be on the materials that you get from wherever. You don't pay the plumber, the electrician, everyone else tax. That's not the way it works. And so what this would do would add some parity in allowing people who purchase manufactured homes to be homeowners on their property to be able to enjoy the same tax benefits as if they were building a stick-built home.
All right, and this certainly will the committee. I realize there's not a fiscal note in the folder, but I think I've got it right here.
Yes, I believe there is one from last year, and I
It
believe
should be accurate. Basically, the combined total is about 32 million in this 1 year of 2025. But since we took the first section out, that's 25.8 million.
Mhm.
So that's going to reduce it to about 6 to 7 million per
That is-
year.
Yes, and that is correct. And yes, thank you. And it's not going to, this is actually going to be tax that does impact local and state, as the oh goodness, the fiscal note does state. I've got here, as you said, starting in 25, 6.3 million, 26, 6.5, 6.9, and 7.3. So it does reduce it a great deal not having Part 1 in the bill.
Right. Might have been Senator Albers was first on here. I'm not sure.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the bill. I certainly believe the parity ought to be there, not picking winners and losers. I appreciate that. And I just want to make sure that we're talking about just doing Section 2.2 of this bill. Is that right, Mr. Chairman? Okay. And it looks like the impact of the state is about $1.6 million. So it's a fairly small amount. Looks like the locals are going to bear a little more of that brunt. Is that right?
That is correct. It will be dispersed throughout the state in local sales tax revenues. So yes, that is correct.
Okay.
But of course, they are able to make it up in property taxes in the future.
Right,
Completely
so-
understand. I would just be curious if ACCG and GMA had input onto this bill.
I believe ACCG does, and I do also have a letter from the chamber if any of the members are interested. They are actually supporting the bill.
All right. Senator Hickman, did you have a comment before we get ACCG up?
I know these manufactured housing is at a different level than what they were when we all called them trailers. Define, if you can, tell us a little bit more about what is a manufactured housing. And I know some of these things now, some of these houses go for as much as $300,000.
That is correct.
$300,000. So this is not a trailer as we used to say, even though it does have wheels on it and it can be moved from place to place. It's a different level of structure than, right, correct?
Correct, and the wheels certainly come off the house. It's permanently there in most cases. The situation now, they have pitched roofs. Some of them have tile and granite countertops. They have garages and porches. What you're thinking of in, maybe 50 years ago or 30 years ago, it's light years different. And in a state that needs workforce housing, this is a tremendous opportunity to have houses that can be built in a matter of months versus a matter of years. But yes, it's very different than what it used to be.
Thank you.
Just a quick question. The 60% that you're asking for, what's that based on? I mean, do you have documentation or something showing that your average labor is 40% of the cost of a unit?
There are, because these are produced inside facilities. They've got very large amounts of data on what's materials and what's the labor. The materials do make up about 60%.
Okay.
Sorry, I don't see any other questions. The floor can take a motion, but we will need to amend the bill too. Okay, we've got a motion to pass, second by Senator Albers. Now, amendment.
I'd amend we eliminate the bill Part 1, Section 1-1 and reorder.
Is that agreeable with the Ledge Council? I thought it was, but I'd like to check. Okay, so let's vote on the amendment first. All in favor of the amendment, raise your hand. All right. Any opposed? And you're right.
Can I make a second amendment?
Sure.
That we add after line 113, this act shall sunset in 2029, July or June 30th, I guess.
June 30th, 2029. Okay, we've got a motion. Is there a second? Second by Senator Hickman. All in favor of that? And I appreciate that because I said we were going fast on these today, and I think some of those may have gotten missed. All in favor, raise your hand. Any opposed? Don't see any. So now I think we're back to the underlying bill. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor of the bill?
Number 2.
Okay.
You were talking a little while ago about taxes. I believe, was it Senator Hickman that brought up the permanent nature of these units? There's 2 different categories of manufactured homes. There's a single wide trailer, and then there's more of a double wide. So is this applying to both categories? Does it apply to the single wide unit and the double wide unit?
Yes, sir, it does. There's also triple wides, and it applies to all those that that you can get a certificate of occupancy to live in permanently. This would not apply to travel trailers or things that can be moved around. These are for permanent structures.
The single wide trailer are the ones who typically have the tires on them, and most often they'll take the tires off, but they'll leave the axles. And they're taxed differently. They're not taxed as real property, if I'm correct.
That is correct. When you're looking at property tax and ad valorem tax, you are correct on
So
that.
they have to be greater than 16 feet in width. Is that right?
I don't know about the width,
I think that's right.
but they are taxed differently if they're permanent or if they're still considered to be movable.
But this applies to all of the manufactured homes.
It does.
Gotcha.
It does.
Just making sure.
Do you have a question?
Yeah, I think we moved quickly on the sunset, but I was wondering if a sunset was needed here because this would be different than the typical credit or deduction.
Well, we're kind of going back and looking at all of these on a regular basis now. We're trying to, we had that big omnibus bill, but.
Okay, but still.
I understand your point.
The sunset is typically on credits. This is more of a setting the policy on how this is taxed and trying to ensure parity with regular homes.
I think that's a fair point. I would prefer a sunset myself, but I think that's also a fair point. We also need to have an implementation start date on this, I believe, don't we?
Yes, I believe it starts on line 116.
It's a question of whether it will also sunset this
Senator Albers.
In some communication here with Department of Revenue, if you go to line 116 on the back page, I think we're going to have to make the act becomes available on January 1st, 2025, and then you can strike out the part 1 because that doesn't exist anymore. And that's probably where you'll put connect the rest of the language of the sunset, which we already measured, but they're going to need until January 1 in order to do that right for Department of Revenue. So
We would,
we would replace.
right, part 1 would be stricken, and I guess you're authorizing legislative council to draw up the appropriate language to do that.
Yes. So
Okay.
moved.
All right, got a second? Are you seconding? Yeah. Okay. All right, did you have a comment? too?
I want to ask a quick question, kind of piggybacking on Majority Gooch's question of single wide, double wide. What about tiny homes? They're manufactured, like Clayton Homes manufactures tiny homes out of Anniston, Alabama, and they're delivered here in Georgia. So would that qualify, a tiny home?
My understanding, we could bring Jimmy Cotty in with the Georgia Manufacturers Homes if you wish, but my understanding is if it can have a certificate of occupancy to be lived in full-time, then it would qualify under this.
Yeah.
Yeah. If it pleases the chairman, can we have Jimmy Cotty from Georgia Manufacturers come up and answer Senator Beach's question?
Thank you, Senator Beach. I'm Jimmy Cotty with the Georgia Manufactured Housing Association, and appreciate you guys taking consideration of House Bill 283. To your question, Senator Beach, tiny homes is not a legal term of any sort. All the homes that we're talking about as far as House Bill 283 are homes that are built to a HUD code standard. Our industry is regulated by the Department of Housing and Urban Development. They create a national building code for us to build to. Tiny homes are somewhat of a phenomenon where they fit more in a category that's called like a park model home. This would not apply to a park model. Now, Clayton Homes, like you mentioned, they do have factories that build I wouldn't call it a true tiny home, but the homes they're building, yes, would qualify because they're building to a HUD code standard.
Okay.
The definition that they pull off of comes from OCGA 82131, and here's what it says, just so you know. It would be a structure that is transportable in one or more sections, which when in traveling mode is 8 body feet or more in width, and 40 feet or more in length, or when erected is 320 square feet or more. So that kind of gives you the.
Okay. Is that you again?
Yes, sir. Sorry, the longer we talk, the more ideas we come up with. Tell me the association you represent.
The Georgia Manufactured Housing Association.
So does this apply just to Georgia manufacturers, or does it apply to any manufacturer in the U.S.?
This bill will apply to consumers of manufactured homes, individuals who are purchasing them. So what the HUD code does, by having a national standard, it allows factories in Georgia to build homes and export them over state lines. It allows factories outside of Georgia to import. We can import homes into Georgia as well. So since there's because with building codes in Georgia, your home is built to the International Residential Code with Georgia amendments. That's the baseline, and you have local jurisdictions that can implement things that are more stringent. You go over to Alabama, they don't have a statewide building minimum code standard. Everything is localized over there. So what HUD does, it has a rigorous quality program. So it ensures that all homes are built, inspected to a certain standard before they're taken out of the factory. The State Fire Marshal's office is responsible for that in Georgia. Every factory has a representative from their organization. They are checking homes as they come off the line.
But you represent the manufacturer, not the consumer.
We represent manufacturers, retailers, communities, service providers, suppliers within the industry for the benefit of our consumers. Yes.
I'm just wondering why we don't apply this just for homes made in Georgia. Does that give you heartburn?
I don't know how DOR, if they could.
It'd be more challenging for
It would certainly be challenging to track that. Originally when I was, there was some talk originally like, well, can we just have the manufacturers have the sales tax paid at wholesale?
Right.
But the problem is DOR couldn't go, say for instance, audit a manufacturer in Tennessee or North Carolina. And the way these homes are built, it's kind of like a car factory. You know, Ford has a plant here that builds SUVs, and they have a plant over here that builds pickup trucks, and they have a plant over here that builds sedans. So in manufactured housing, you have a plant, and they build several models of homes of various sizes and types, and then you have another plant where you might want to do something different, and another plant where you might want to do something different. So in order for Georgia consumers to be able to realize all those options, our retailers are ordering homes in from Georgia manufacturers and from those in the states around us, and we export them as well to
So
neighboring
do
states.
Do other states reciprocate?
Other states all have a lower sales tax on manufactured housing. Yes, sir. We are the highest in the Southeast, save for Alabama,
Okay.
and we're the highest by far.
Gotcha.
And I would like to say I got involved with this bill for the consumers. I've been a real estate professional for almost 2 decades, and individuals who live in manufactured homes typically there are some that are $300,000, as was pointed out, but most oftentimes it's an entry point home for individuals to be in the communities they need to be in. And it's important to me to have some parity. I don't want someone who is purchasing a home because they opt for a manufactured home to pay more in taxes essentially and have a higher end cost at purchasing their property than someone else would for the same square footage.
All right, any other questions? We've gone through the amendments, haven't we? We're back to the bill itself. Okay, so striking that line, on 116. Okay, so let's vote on that amendment then on 116, striking that line. Changing that to January 1st, 2025 with that part out ahead of it. Instructing Legislative Council to do that. All in favor of that amendment, raise your hand. Okay. Any
How
opposed?
do we, can we talk a little bit more about that amendment?
Yeah.
Earlier? Not the one you just passed, but the one about the Georgia manufacturing.
Okay.
I'm not sure we've got a clear answer on that. Seems like you would be able to
Is
delineate.
DOR here? I don't know if you want to speak to it or not. Probably not, but we still want you to.
They're always listening and watching you.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Hi, I'm Chester Cook, Deputy State Revenue Commissioner.
All right, so I guess the question is, if you limited it just to Georgia manufactured, how would you administrate that?
Yeah, we would simply, from any regulatory guidance or bulletins, put that the exemption itself only applies to those homes that are manufactured in Georgia. We would simply put guidance out to do that if that was the case. To answer a little bit of your question, if someone is shipping it in, it's likely they already have Nexus here and they're reporting tax. If someone had paid tax somewhere else, they would get a reciprocal credit just like any other sales tax purchase. So from an administrative perspective, that's not an issue.
Okay. Senator Estevez.
I understand the intent. I think it's a noble intent. But if the other states across the Southeast have lower sales tax across the board, isn't there a possibility of a price increase for consumers in Georgia? We're in some ways manipulating the market only in the state of Georgia, it seems like. Yeah.
Okay, you need to come up, don't come to the mic if you're gonna do it.
You'd
There's
get a discount for the-
millions listening at home that wanna hear your answer.
It's no different than the Agricultural Commission.
DOR left
made
in a
Georgia.
hurry.
You know, it's just another. He's our buddy. No, in all honesty, I'm not trying to hurt your bill. I'm trying to enhance it. I'm trying to make an advantage for Georgia businesses. If you have an incentive to buy Georgia, whether it's a car or a bag of fruit or whatever, manufactured home, this would give your members an advantage over their neighboring states. And you're saying Alabama has no standard, so they're using local laws to build their homes. To me, this gives a lot of advantage to buy from Georgia. The homes are built to the international code. You're getting an exemption if you buy it from Georgia. and your members are from Georgia, so I don't see how that would hurt you, Jimmy. That's what I'm trying to do, is make sure we don't hurt your industry and your association, so.
Well, I understand your intent, Senator Gooch, but to Senator Estevez's question, it would when I go back to my Ford example and say, well, these Georgia sedans, we're going to charge less tax, but if you want to buy a pickup truck, we're going to make you pay more tax because it was built somewhere else. Each factory builds different quality standards of homes. So like Clayton True in Waycross, Georgia is like your most basic, very entry level type of home. It's going to be, if you need just a quality roof over your head at a very low price, they can provide that. Say you need more space and you need a home that's built in Alabama whose factory is set up to build larger homes. Each factory is limited in what they can build. So it's not like a plant in Waycross could say, well, this home's going to Albany, Georgia, so do the Albany, Georgia home, and then this same home is going to Coffee County, so do the Coffee County home. They have a model and they build it and they can manipulate the interior a little bit, but what you would essentially be doing is limiting a consumer's options in terms of you may be pricing them out of a home that they need that they can't afford to buy, whereas a home in Georgia going across state lines in Tennessee, they're going to pay 3% sales tax for that. In Florida, they're going to pay 3% sales tax. In South Carolina, they're going to pay no sales tax. North Carolina, they're going to pay 3.5% sales tax. And so, in addition to taxing the building materials, this is also creating parity with the states around us in terms of an effective tax rate, if you will. Like I can give you just a real world. I think Senator Avatar in the last.
We've got to keep moving, so you got to be quick.
Well, and if I could just interject, I know my parents live in the Savannah area. They go into South Carolina a lot and buy things because they just do. And when we have all these border states, Columbus is right there at Phoenix City, and you have all these, we have a huge footprint of our state, largest state east of the Mississippi. We have lots of bordering areas, and people shop, Chattanooga, people shop, in various places, in Florida. I certainly do want to support Georgia businesses. I have a Georgia business. I love Georgia businesses, but I don't want to make it a situation where someone's having to basically pay more ultimately in the end because they're having to have the home transported a longer distance when in actuality they're closer to one possibly just over the state line.
Senator Albers.
Jimmy, several years ago when Commissioner Harper was in the Senate, we actually passed some type of a tax credit for manufactured houses. What was that? I don't remember.
The first part of the bill that's being repealed.
Okay, so that is going away.
That will go away. That was a partial credit for people that were converting them to real property. So some people buy them, they leave them as personal property. Okay. Some people purchase them and they convert them to real property through the detitlement process.
Thank you.
And so this will eliminate that tax credit and just it'll apply to all homes sold at retail.
All right. So we've got the questions. I guess we're back to the underlying bill if there's not any more amendments. Is that correct? So all in favor of the bill as it's amended, raise your hand. All right, and opposed? One opposed? Okay. Motion carries. You might stay there just a minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We're done with you, so. I'll get, Chairman Blackman, did you come back in? Did I see you? You stepped out. Come on up here, if you would. We've been working diligently on this property tax issue, and have put together some stuff over here that takes one of his bills and one of her bills. The bill we had was that it's mandatory. The bill Representative Camp had was that you had to opt in for it to happen. Some thinking was going on. Matter of fact, this might have been Chairman Blackman's idea that we would do an opt-out, and we wouldn't make it mandatory as I'd wanted to do, but it wasn't opt-in. You had to opt out. You had to specifically say you didn't want to be a part of this. So it still leaves the locals the option to opt out. So the Senate bill in your 581 there, House Bill 581, the language is essentially there from Senate Bill 349 with an opt-out. And additionally, we're going to use the House Bill 1182 legislation for the constitutional amendment. So both of these are in here, so they're sort of a companion together. Probably, you don't have to stay up here right now, but I just wanted to, while you were there, go through that part. And probably, I know we worked with ACCG and GMA over the weekend and then some. I don't have young children, so I'm probably not in as much trouble as he is for how much time we spent on that this weekend. But if you can go ahead and sit back, because I'm going to see if Diego, and you can stay up there, Chairman Blackman, but if, I'm sorry, Dante, if you want to come up here. I said Diego.
Thank you, committee.
Dante used to actually be in my office as an intern about 7 or 8 years ago, right?
Yes, sir.
I'll tell you,
17, 18.
we're short on time, but very quick story. My daughter was down here, and I had to be here, and he was going to pick her up on Peachtree Street. And she was looking at playing soccer for Georgia State, which she did her freshman year, and then transferred to UGA. And I gave him a picture of her. I said, pick her up on the street. She had gone to a majority school, had never met anybody white named Dante. So she's waiting on Peachtree Street, and he goes to pick her up. He's got the picture. Oh, there she is. She's calling me up, and she says, there's some white guy claiming he's named Dante wanting to pick me up in the car. I don't know about this. So you're from what, New Jersey? I guess maybe
Yep,
a little bit more.
up north.
Georgia, not so much. But anyway, tell us. Yeah,
I
yeah.
wondered where his bias towards the Senate came from, and now I know.
Yeah, we try to train him a little bit. Anyway, and he worked for the DOR in between too, so he's had experience there. Tell us about the bill briefly.
Okay.
Since I took up too much of your time already.
Well, thank you, Chairman Huffstetter. As brief as I can be, most of the language from this bill is from your Senate Bill 349 as it passed the Senate. The settlement conference language in section, I think it should be in section 2.5, that's been simplified. There was some language added addressing the sales ratio issue on the House side, and that was in House Bill 1031. Department of Audits and Accounts had some concerns with that original language, and so the language that is in this bill is compromise language that the Department of Audits and Accounts had to try and solve that issue. Now that compromise language should be taxpayer friendly because it removes pressure from the assessors to aggressively increase the values.
And let me jump in there really quickly. They had to, if a house was appraised on January 1st, they weren't allowed to do it under the Senator Chip Rogers bill the rest of the year, whereas DOR was using the next January 1st. So there could be a discrepancy, could cause some differences in the two. So that sentence from his bill is stricken, which I think we're all in agreement is the way to make a fix of this. Go ahead.
Yes, sir. So in a nutshell, removing that language helps decrease values and decrease millage rates. So in that sense, it's taxpayer friendly. And then this bill has the same floating homestead exemption language from your Senate Bill 349 with the 3% allowance for inflation, and then that opt-out that you mentioned.
All right. Any questions? Again, that one sentence was in there. The Senate Bill 349 is essentially here, but the change is that they are allowed to opt out. After the resolution would pass, they've got a period of time that the locals can opt out of it if they desire. Yeah. And it also, the other thing I'll add is that if they do opt out, the breaks we're giving them on the reporting of a tax increase, that goes away. Sure.
Can you explain where that came from? The opt-out Why do we have an opt-out exemption?
Well, they wanted, the House.
Can you tell
had-
me who they are?
The House had wanted, under Representative Camp's bill, they wanted an opt-in, that you had to opt in to do it. Ours was gonna be mandatory.
Are you talking about the governing authority of each county?
So, rather than them having to opt in, which would mean basically you could never do anything and just kinda let it go, they have to have public hearings and say they want to opt out of this. That would be after the constitutional amendment passes by 90%, but they would have to do that. Or whatever it passes by, I'm just guessing.
If I may, Chairman
Scratch my head
Huffstetter, the language for that opt-out, I mean, the locals would have to go through 3 advertisements and 3 public hearings, same as we do right now if we weren't going to do a full rollback for the millage rate. So very similar language.
Can you give me a reasonable reason why a county commission board would do that?
Would opt out?
Yes.
The only reason for a local government to opt out would be if they had concerns about their existing digest, and it would affect some counties more than others, or some local governments more than others if they had a higher. It depends on the mix of homestead versus non-homestead properties, because that 3% homestead exemption and the inflationary increase is only on homesteaded properties. So they have more homesteaded properties is capping more of their digest.
So how does this impact the school board? They don't have that opt-out clause.
The school boards would have that opt-out clause
They would?
under this legislation, yes, sir.
So the county could opt in or not opt out, and the school could opt out, so you'd have 2 different,
Yeah,
basically. you'd
Well,
have
we
2
do right
different
now.
addresses.
Counties, cities, and schools would all automatically be included unless they go through that opt-out process of running the 3 advertisements and holding the 3 hearings.
So I guess if the school was approaching their 20 mil cap, then they would go to the opt-out clause.
They may consider to
And
do
they
so.
could do the opt-out anytime,
No.
just one time?
One-time opt-out, and so they need to run through those 3 advertisements and hearings and complete that opt-out by March 1st.
After
of
the
2025.
amendment in November.
Yes, sir.
All right, Senator Tillery. Okay. All right, any other questions by this? So right now, I guess first we'll take up House Bill 581, the substitute to it, which is LC 500888S.
Move to pass.
Got a motion to pass. Is there a second? Second by Senator Estevez. Y'all need to, you have any other questions, anybody, or?
I was just talking about striking school systems out of there, opt-out.
Well, it's the compromise, I think, to move it forward. I was mandatory, they were opt-in. We've worked with some others on this. And the administration, I think, wanted this compromise, so. All right, all in favor of this, if there's any other, not any other discussion, raise your hand. Okay, any opposed? I think it's unanimous. Okay, so, your bill carried over here, Chairman Blackman.
You mean I passed a bill out of Senate Finance?
Yeah.
I shouldn't say I. Wait, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Now, Representative Camp has the underlying resolution, which is that's what would be on the ballot to go along with this. That's correct. So that would be the substitute to HR 1022.
Move to pass.
Motion to pass. Is there a second? Second by Senator Estevez. Again, any discussion on this? This easiest one you've had here, I think, so.
Yes, sir.
All in favor, raise your hand. Okay, any opposed? Passes unanimously. I don't know where everybody's at on their committees right now. Do we need to, we've got one more item, or we can move it till tomorrow? Everybody okay here? I want, Okay, I think we can keep a quorum here. So we've got one more, and that's gonna be, Representative Crowe. I think you're still here, aren't you? Back up here. Make sure he's got a copy of it. I think you do or not. You don't? Make sure he gets one.
Not unless it's the one that passed out of the house. I suspect it's not.
Okay, so this is LC 500878S. The difference in what you've got is there's been some additions for qualifications that you'll see in there. But those that don't qualify, the percentage is 50%. I think we've got at least the first part of the audit study is in your packet there. Y'all may have seen this right here. And a couple things I'll point out on that. If you look on Roman numeral 4 in the fiscal research audit, the number of the cost of the state of these right now, after it gets the benefit and opt-out, you know, the increased revenue, the decreased cost is about $771.8 million. Now that was in 2022. I know the formula has gone up on it. Right now on the 9%, you get 9% of present value, but that present value keeps going up over a 10-year period. So this cost is over the life of them, what 1 year's would cost you over the life of them. So it is an annual cost. Anyway, if y'all want to look that over for a minute, any questions? And yeah, I'm trying to look here. Let me get a little order here on some stuff here, just a second. So, 1182, we've got Jet Tony, if you want to come up.
I think he's still testifying across the street.
Okay. We've got a question. Is that Senator Beach?
Yeah, I just want to ask a question on line 60 and 61. What is a targeted community project that would qualify for 100% tax credit? Who decides that? Department of Community Affairs?
Yeah, it starts in line 40, I believe.
Yeah.
That's the uplift criteria. If it meets
Yeah.
one of those on lines 41 through 46, A through E, then it's eligible for 100%.
Okay.
It looks like, Mr. Chairman, you said there was some added criteria, but we still got the same 5 uplifts, which is the defined rural county.
Veterans in there? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, any questions by the committee on this? It's very similar to the bill he brought over here with the percentage change. Senator Hickman, is that you had a question?
Yes, sir. Not to be really confused, but does the Department of Community Affairs, are they the ones that decide whether these projects qualify, and how do they determine, is it like you spend $1, you get $1? And I need some clarification on that.
Luckily enough, they're also here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Please.
Sure,
Speak
come on
on
up.
their behalf.
And I'm also wondering about the condition of these, you know, you ride around, you see a lot of these, and it may not be these type of homes and all that. They have windows broken, doors are kicked in, that type of thing. How are we making sure that they maintain a certain level of standard and all?
Tell us who you are first.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman, and thank you, members of the committee. My name is Philip Gilman. I'm the Deputy Commissioner for Housing Assistance and Development at the Georgia Department of Community Affairs. So I heard 2 questions there, Senator.
Talk slowly, please.
Pardon?
Talk slower.
Yes, sir. So I heard two questions there. The first one was, how do we determine how much funding a deal gets?
That's right.
So we get about 3 times as many applications as awards that we can fund. And they have to work with.
Is that overall on the 9 and 4%?
Overall on the 9 and 4%, yes, sir.
Okay, because on the 9%, I thought it was about 6 times you get on that, but,
On average, it's about 3 times as many.
okay, between the two of them, okay.
So they'll have to certify all their costs and provide them to us. We underwrite the deal and verify that all those costs are as accurate as possible. And then it's our responsibility to make sure that no more credits are provided than are absolutely necessary to make the deal work. The legislation for the state LIHTC in the state creates that dollar for dollar match. So for each federal dollar we award a state dollar alongside it. What that means is, if all it needs is 3 federal and 3 state dollars to work, even if it could be awarded 6 federal dollars, we would only give it 3 federal and 3 state, if that makes sense. So we lower the federal award to make sure we don't over subsidize the deal, and then it gets a matching federal and state award. What that functionally does is, instead of giving the maximum federal award, we give a smaller federal award, fill that gap with state credits, and that means we fund more deals overall.
So this bill originally had a change to an 80% deal, and now I think in the amendment it's down to 50%. How do you feel about those? Is that going to hinder the program, or that's my concern?
So any reduction in funding is going to come with a commensurate reduction in affordable housing supply.
So so let me ask this, if you've got 3 applications for every one, the audit said they felt like most all were gonna be built anyway from Department of Fiscal Audits.
So what we find when we look at these properties, you know, if that were the case, let's say we get 90 applications and we can only fund 30, the other 60, if they could be built, would be built, and they aren't. They all have to end up reapplying the next year. What the credit that you're describing provides is about a 70% equity down payment on a $10 million development. That's $7 million. There's not another source to provide $7 million. They would go to a bank if they could, but a bank is going to say, you're charging $800 for rent because that's the affordable rent required through the program. But the bank will also say it costs $700 to maintain each unit. And at that small marginal income, the bank would not loan a mortgage large enough to cover the cost. So that is the purpose of the program, is to provide that equity. And Senator, you asked another question about broken doors and broken windows. So fortunately, one of the benefits of the public-private partnership in this case is that we have a 30-year obligation to do compliance oversight on these properties. So we are going out regularly, doing inspections, doing drive-by inspections, doing file audit inspections. But there's also an investor who has his or her money on the line for the first 15 years of the property, and they have a very strong financial incentive to make sure there are not broken doors and windows.
So do you feel like the 80% is reasonable and the 50% is not reasonable, or what's
The reality is, at a certain point, once you remove enough funding, a deal is going to collapse either way. I believe Jet Tony, I know he's not over here, had presented a proposal from the developers within this program to increase that to something like 88%, because that was the smallest gap that the developers felt like they could find a way to bridge. As an agency, functionally what would happen, we have limited gap funding resources, and we would have to do our best to spread those limited resources to fund as many of those gaps that are now created. So the larger the gap, the less far we can spread those resources.
And what types of people stay in these housing? Seniors, veterans?
We have senior housing. We have some, we're actually allowed through HUD to have some exclusively senior housing for folks either
But those are
55
staying at 100%, correct?
Yes, yeah, 100% senior housing. We have some of those. We have
bill.
veteran housing. The bulk of what we finance would be workforce housing, so families in most communities earning up to about $25 an hour.
So you've got in the
Thank you.
in the Department of Fiscal Audits here, where Arkansas is at 20% on the 9% credits. California's at 30% on those, 13 on the 4%. DC's 25%. I mean, I could go down the line. Why is ours so much higher than everybody else? I mean, they're still building these, according to the audit, they're still building these in those other states.
It's a good question, Senator, and I will note that table you're referring to cites Novogradic's website, and I called the folks at Novogradic myself after this was published and pointed out to them what you noted earlier, is that this is a 10-year tax credit. And so functionally every other state referenced in that table references the 1-year credit amount. So a state might have a $10 million program. That's $10 million a year for 10 years. That's actually an $100 million program. Ours on that table references the full 10-year amount. So to make it an apples to apples comparison, you need to either divide the Georgia number by 10.
So California is 30% per year or 300%? Is that what you're saying?
So the percentage amounts, if you're looking at an updated table, the percentage amounts, California would be providing 30%. I'm actually not, California doesn't provide 30%, sorry. There are a few states, DC, Hawaii, Georgia, and a few others that provide a percent of the federal. Most other states provide a hard capped number.
All right, well, Senator Estevez.
Yeah, I just want to ask some clarifying questions that I think can answer some of those questions, Mr. Chairman. My understanding is that this program for Georgia, this credit is the only state money that's going towards affordable workforce housing.
On the financing side, yes.
On the financing side, that's correct. So, Mr. Chairman, I think...
Are you saying the others have other programs? or
Correct.
what?
I think what the audit is missing is the fact that a lot of those other states, for
Well,
example,
we looked at that, and Florida had a different program, and I said, well, let's do that. And it was basically a loan program. Then and we went to hearings around the state, then, no, we don't want to do that. So,
well, my point was other states probably have a lower match because they have other money that's being infused into the industry.
all right, Senator Albers, go ahead. If you're
And then I was going to go into talk about the houses or the projects that continue to be built. One of the reasons for that is the audit took into account projects that continued in places like Atlanta, for example, that has a robust local incentive authority or incentives where those projects, even without state support, can move forward because the locals are providing significant incentives. Where this bill would impact projects is in areas where you have federal support, but you have very little local support, and that tends to be away from cities like Atlanta. And then the last thing that I was going to mention was that the projects that also move forward to Senator Hickman's question, also without that additional funding, additional financing, tend to be of lower quality because they can't afford. They have to limit costs when you don't get have the incentives behind it. So the quality tends to be lower, and you could see there are pictures where you could see the difference between a project that was funded through this program and a project that was not, and one's market rate, and that project does not look very good, even though it's built around the same time, whereas the one that was funded through this program is a higher quality because of the standards that are required. So I just wanted to make sure to point that.
And the housing authority is another one that's still at 100% in this bill. Senator Albers.
I appreciate the comments. Most of them don't coincide with the study that was done by the Department of Audits, though. We are the second most generous in the United States of America, behind Pennsylvania. We spend more money than anybody else does. There are local development tools that are in place. There is a massive, massive federal tax credit, plus all the things locals can do, plus we're adding more onto that. It comes to what end on some of this, too. I think this is fair and balanced, but I appreciate what you said. It does not coincide anything with the study the Department of Audits did, and I think they were pretty thorough in that process. So I appreciate what you're saying, but I have watched ones that didn't get it, and in fact did watch them build as well. So thank you.
There is a lot of competition for these, I think, because they are the most generous, and I think we will. My opinion is we'll still fill them. Senator Beach.
So this is just, if I'm correct, for rural Georgia?
So
No.
no. Would you like me to answer that?
Or obviously, the targeted community project means it has to be located in rural Georgia. The reason I ask, we're trying to do a project in Cherokee County. The county's donated 10 acres of land, and we want to build houses for police and firemen. Would that qualify under this, if we wanted to qualify?
Well, these are more, are you talking about houses for them to own?
Yeah, just to sell them to them at a reduced rate, at an affordable rate.
Yeah, this
These
is
are
gonna be
more
a different kind of
multi-
project.
multi-home-
These are going to be rents.
Multi-home
Yeah,
things.
this is for
Yeah.
multifamily rental.
All right, we appreciate your comments unless somebody needs the commissioner anymore. Senator Tiller, you were next. Oh, I'm sorry, Anna Vitarte. I'm sorry, I said that wrong.
So real quick, just to make sure we're clear here on what we're voting on. So just to piggyback on Senator Hickman and Senator Estevez, does this impact, for example, multifamily housing, where I know there are organizations in South Georgia rural counties trying to renovate buildings where persons with disabilities, severe disabilities, who maybe are veterans, housed currently? Like I know of an example in, I think, Ware County, where I've heard that's happening. Would this fall into that category potentially? And I mean, in terms of persons with disability all across the spectrum.
Yeah, so that was a question that came up during debate on the House floor, and somebody specifically mentioned about persons or families with a disabled person in the household, and I think that there's enough of these. All you got to do is meet one of these criteria here, and so if it's in Ware County, that's going to be in a rural area.
Yeah, look at line 40, Jason.
Okay.
And so that would be covered by that. But yeah, that's why we have the uplift criteria in here, is we're trying to make sure that if we are going to
All
invest
those
dollars
in
in
the-
it, is to
yeah,
make sure they go towards what it's meant for.
Okay, yeah, all those in the rural counties are covered, as well as seniors. They're still at 100%. Any housing authorities are still at 100% rehabilitation or renovation.
Veterans, first
Veterans, I
responders.
mean, it's not that much. First responders are in there. Okay, Senator Orrock, you had a question before you left.
Madam
Last
Chair,
question.
yeah. Did we resolve the issue of whether we were comparing apples and oranges?
We haven't, and this is the first I've heard of this.
Uh-huh.
And so I would think that you would bring that to us if you disagreed with this report. You would bring it before we have a meeting right here and say, I've got this, but I can't tell you exactly what it is. So,
And my apologies, Mr. Chair. So I started at DCA on March 7th of last year after this was published. So when I made the comments of reaching out to the folks at Novogradac, that was in a prior capacity. To answer your question, Senator, and looking at what you referenced, Mr. Chair, on California, it references 30% of eligible basis. Without getting into tax finance, the column I'm referring to is the one at the end where it estimates California spends $50 million. That's a 1-year credit, so you'd have to multiply
right,
by the
I didn't
number
even
of
get into
years
the
of that
caps on
credit.
those years so much as the percentages. Okay, well, we appreciate your comments. If you got information different than this, you could bring it to us.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
All
Could
right,
I ask one step further? I'd like to ask you to go meet with Greg Griffith in the Department of Audits and go through the analysis with them in detail. Thank you.
We'd be happy to,
Excellent idea.
Senator.
All right. So we're back to the underlying bill. Any other questions? We're ready for a motion. If not, we've got a motion by Senator Albers to pass. Is there a second? Second. Any other discussion? All in favor of the bill, and this is different than the House. I'm sure we'll work on it some more between us and them, but it would keep the process going. All in favor of the bill, raise your hand. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, and opposed? Okay, so we've got, don't count you either way? No. Okay, 4. You're opposed. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 4, 5. I think it's 5 to 5, so I will, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay. Okay, let's raise your hands if you're for the bill, as it is. Okay, we've got 4 for it, those opposed. We've got 5, so I will tie it so it still stays in the committee.
Thank y'all.
Meeting adjourned.